Excellence in our industry comes from quality teams creating quality products. In an industry that's constantly evolving, it's your unwavering grit, determination, and passion that drives innovation and elevates standards to new heights. As brewers ourselves, we know what that passion looks like. It's the drive to create something exceptional, fueled by dedication and love for the craft. As a stainless steel equipment manufacturer for over 10 years, ABS Commercial provides a full consultative approach to our customers, from consultation and design to installation and ongoing care and maintenance. Whether you're in planning, just getting started, or looking to expand, we're here to support your growth and your success. Thank you for choosing ABS Commercial as your trusted partner.
Hello, everyone. Thank you and welcome. My name is Alex Koral. I'm Regulatory General Counsel for Sovos ShipCompliant, and I am delighted to be joined today by Shauna Barnes of the Barnes Beverage Group.
Hello, hello. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Yes, it's so nice. We are here to talk about non-alcoholic beer, kind of the basic compliance rules, the laws around it, and some of the guidance around how to actually bring this product to market, because it's a very interesting and exciting and developing product that I think a lot of us are interested in developing. But it also presents a lot of unique challenges that, while they may resemble what we often face when it comes to selling beer, producing beer, it's not always quite the same. So we really want to talk a little bit about some of those basics and just make sure we're all kind of up to date on things. As I mentioned, I work with the company Sovos ShipCompliant. We are a software compliance service that provides 50-state solutions for interstate shipping and distribution of beer and other alcoholic beverages across the country. We provide a lot of free guidance and rules around regulations on shipping of beer, and non-alcoholic beer is part of that too. Shauna, do you want to talk a little bit about the Barnes Beverage Group and what you do and your interaction with the industry?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So I'm Shauna Barnes. I'm the founding partner of Barnes Beverage Group, which is a law firm of 11 attorneys and compliance professionals, and we support the beverage industry. So we think of ourselves as a kind of general business law, commercial law firm that goes really deep in alcohol. So one of our things that we do is help folks manage their compliance, bring their products to life, and then manage it through the market, and then kind of all the legal stuff that goes with that. So we have a number of clients who are expanding into the non-alcoholic space, either as their first product offering, what I think of as kind of the athletic model, and then of course folks who have a traditional brewery and in some cases are looking into moderation themselves, because as we get older, moderation I think becomes much more important. So or at least a little more interesting for us, right? So anyhow, excited to talk about this today, and I think it's a really good topic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of one of these really developing fields. Like, it's just I remember growing up decades past, it was always, well, one, American beer always declass A to European beer, and don't even think about non-alcoholic beer because ugh. And how both of those are just completely not true anymore is that, obviously there is tremendous beer produced all over the country, and increasingly it's the non-alcoholic options that are really exciting. So yeah, happy to support it and happy to help you manage your compliance needs, because they are many. So we can dig into this. Our agenda today is we're going to talk a little bit about the basics of non-alcoholic beer, kind of the broad regulations that govern it. We'll talk a little bit more about the distribution of it, and then get into a little bit of the kind of common issues and regulatory or distribution problems that can come up that make this different than other products that you might be used to selling. So first, to talk a little bit about the basic beer regulations. The first thing to really recognize is that, one, just like with full strength beer, is that this is a very broad, very all-encompassing term that can really include a lot of different products out there. And so there's really not one single set of rules, not one single solution that will encompass all of the possible non-alcoholic beer products out there. which is one reason why it's really important to have counsel on hand and somebody who there can really dig into the individual issues and understand what your specific needs are, because it's, what works for one brewery may not work for the other, and so you really want to have the specific information. That said, there are kind of a lot of familiar rules that might apply. And so you want to be aware of these and just tracking them, making sure you're complying with them as when and where you do get into the actual production and sale of non-alcoholic beer. And these are things like, licensing rules, licensing requirements, labeling restrictions, what to put and not to put on labels. And then all of the classic distribution and sales restrictions that are so common within the sale of full strength beer as well. So really, a lot that we can get into, and we'll just try to get into a little bit of the basics to get over that. Starting out there, the big thing is first to define what this product is, because again, any beer can be a very all-encompassing term. So you want to make sure that, one, it's actually meeting one of the definitions that would make it a regulated product. Because if it's not a regulated product, then effectively you're making juice or other soft drinks, and therefore it's a whole different set of rules that could apply here. You're not necessarily worried about licensing and label restrictions. You're worried about other sorts of production requirements. But, this does bring it out of the realm of a alcoholic products expertise. So it's more just a call than if you're not dealing with a regulated product, then maybe it's a different set of attorneys you might want to be talking to. Broadly, when we're looking at beer, you want to start off at the highest level there at the federal regulations. And so we're looking here at the two different statutes that govern beverage alcohol in the United States. This is the Internal Revenue Code and the Federal Alcohol Administration Act, both passed, last updated sometime in the 1930s. But we're still dealing with the definitions and restrictions that those statutes bring. Helpfully, they both have different definitions of what is regulated and not regulated products. So you want to be aware of whether you're dealing with a product that is subject to one or both of the different statutes. When we're looking at the Internal Revenue Code, both products include non-alcoholic beer and low ABV beer as a special subset of the overall more encompassing definition of cereal beverages. So these are broadly beverages that are made with malts. Under the Internal Revenue Code, that can be made with malts or a malt substitute. It can be fermented, but it does not necessarily need to be fermented. And then importantly, when it is under 0.5 ABV, when it's consumed, this is then when it brings it into the non-alcoholic category of those cereal beverages. Importantly, with the IRC, they regulate, they put out requirements around licensing, label requirements, formulas. This is where we get all of the beer taxes as well. So you want to be aware of if your product is subject to the IRC. The other area to look at is the FAAA, the Federal Alcohol Administration Act. This act has a slightly different definition of cereal beverages. Under the FAA, products must be made with both malts and hops. So this does really narrow down the products that would be included in here. Really excludes a lot of those non-malt beverages, the FMBs, other products that are not made with hops. Importantly, then again, to get into this category, it has to be under 0.5 ABV, and then it will get the special provisions that would apply to low alcohol products. But again, if it's not made with hops, then it would be not subject to the FAAA, while it might still be subject to the IRC. Critically there, the FAAA is where we get our COLA approvals and other types of requirements. And so that's, you want to be aware of those restrictions if you would be subject to those requirements or not. Once you do have that understanding of what you're producing and what sort of laws it would be subject to, it's important to understand if you need a license, what kind of licenses would be required. And generally, if you are dealing with these kind of malt beverages, even if everything you make is going to end up being under 0.5%, you still need to be licensed by the TTB. You need to have those federal licenses. And so if you already are a brewer, if you already are making products, you have your brewer's notice, that really should cover a lot of this. This is that brewer's notice allows you to produce most kinds of or pretty much all malt beverages. So your regular full strength beers, your flavored malt beverages, a lot of hard seltzers when they're produced with malt substitutes, all the sort of products that are subject to the brewer's notice. And these would include a lot of non-alcoholic beers as well, if you are especially making one of these products and then de-alcoholizing them. So you want to have that if you're making these base products and then making them non-alcoholic. Again, you need to have that brewer's notice in order to make those products. There might be additional licenses required. First and foremost, of course, there are state licenses that we'll talk a little bit later that would very likely be required depending on what you're making. You also, especially depending on what you're making, you might need to have FDA registration of your production plants to make sure that they are sanitary and safe and producing healthy products that people can consume. Critically, if you are, depending on how you are going to remove the alcohol from your products, you might also need to have a distilled basic permit, a distilled spirits permit from the TTB if you are using distillation to remove the alcohol. So this might get into your planning of if you're trying to enter this product, if that could constrain the types of processes you would want to use to remove the alcohol from your products, because a distilled spirits permit is kind of a complicated one. It's a little bit more involved than getting a brewer's notice. You need to making sure it's really a safe and proper facility. Everybody is very aware and scared of distillation. It's a more industrial process that involves a lot of chemicals and can light things on fire. And so this is really, they want to make sure that you're doing it in a safe way. There are plenty of other ways to remove alcohol that do not require distillation. So you can get around this, but again, that's something to be aware of as you are getting into the planning process. Once you have your license and you're making it, of course, then one of the big things is to deal with labeling and actually in formulas as well. These are, again, requirements that come from the IRC, from the FAAA that are imposed on all these malt products that you would want to make sure you're complying with, that you are talking to the TTB, getting their approval on these things. When it comes to actually producing any beer, you often need to get approval from the TTB on the method you're removing alcohol. They may want to know if you're using a distillation method or not and have those licenses. So you would need to submit some sort of documentation to there to prove how you're removing alcohol. And formula review. This is something that comes up with producing full strength beer and other products, but you may need to submit your formulas to the TTB and get lab analysis to, one, prove that it actually is a 0% ABV product. And then if you were using any sort of non-standard ingredients, those sort of things that would require a formula approval for a full strength beer would apply to non-alcoholic beer as well. So again, just being aware of these things, being aware of what you're doing with your full strength beer production, that they may apply to your non-alcoholic beer production as well. And one of the things that comes up again then is the labeling. You're going to have to document the products and put your labels on the shelf. A lot of the rules that apply to full strength beer would apply to non-alcoholic beer as well. These are rules that come down from both the Internal Revenue Code and the Federal Alcohol Administration Act. So even if your product does not have hops in it, a lot of these rules would be required. These are a lot of the standard requirements that you're probably very familiar with your beer products. So these are identifying the producer, saying who you are, where you're located. So if anybody has a problem, they know who to go after. Properly documenting the volume using all of the fiddly requirements that the TTB imposes on that. Identifying the type of beer, the type of product that it is in there. Importantly, if you are going to use if you are making a non-alcoholic beer product under 0.5%, you do not need that government warning. So don't worry about that big block of text. But be aware of all the other things that could be required on there. And if you are making a FAAA subject beer, non-alcoholic beer, something made with malt and hops that was fermented, that could require a COLA if you're then shipping that across state borders. So you want to be aware of that, and you might actually need to get pre-approval from the TTB on your labels. So, being aware of this, checking that your labels are approved, that's very important. And one of the big things that really does hold up a lot of NA beer here is getting that type right. I think, Shauna, we were talking about this when we were planning the presentation, but you mentioned how there's a lot of confusion about the names of beer, how to call them actually, and what do you really see there? Can you talk about?
Yeah, so it's interesting, especially for the I think of the folks who are already brewing and they're expanding into the space. They want to call their products a non-alcoholic stout or a non-alcoholic lager, which makes sense, right? But stout and lager and a handful of other terms have clear statutory regulatory definitions. And so you can't call it that. And when these products were first launching, there was a lot of confusion, frustration, colas were getting kicked back. The TTB we've had some success putting it through as a style. So you would say stout style, Pilsner style, lager style. And that seems to be able to get through TTB with some approval, but you can't just call it a non-alcoholic stout because it doesn't meet the definition of that. Interestingly, though, you can call it an IPA because India Pale Ale is the class and type, but IPA is not. So there's definitely some wiggle in there. There's some ways to get you to the claims that you want to make, but it's something that I would recommend that folks be aware of as they're working on their labeling, especially if you've got a tight turn, shelf placements you're trying to meet and a deadline. You don't want to get jammed up at TTB because you put the wrong class and type on the label.
Yeah, absolutely. Those labeling issues can really be hamper those time to market projections. And really interesting how that, I know that you have to use that style when you're using any type of geographic designation, the Belgian style ale, all that. And it's really interesting how that's kind of a, ish sort of suffix there. It's stout.
Ish works.
Yeah. But yeah, as you say, very important to get across and to make sure you're following these rules, is that the legal area is very particular when it comes to their definitions, and you don't want to cross that. So a very good shout out there, reminder for everybody. The other part of labeling these products is actually labeling them as alcoholic free or non-alcoholic. And because these also have very particular rules of when you can call these products alcohol free or non-alcoholic, how that needs to appear on your label. And again, you do not want to get foul of that, because then this can, have other consequences beyond not just being able to sell this product. So there are a couple rules out there that the TTB has expressed. One is on using the actual phrase alcohol free on a label. The big thing to know is that cannot be used if your product has any alcohol content at all. If it is at all above 0.0000% ABV, you cannot use the phrase alcohol free. If it is properly 0.0% ABV, then it can appear. But if you do use, so, that's the one constraint. The thing is that if you are going to then advertise it as 0.0 ABV, then you also must indicate alcohol free on the label. You must use those exact phrases. I think you can use alcohol free without also using 0.0 ABV. There are now federal rules against around putting ABV on beer products. So you don't need to say 0.0, but if you do, then you do need to say alcohol free, I guess, just to make it doubly clear to everybody. The other option is to use the phrase non-alcoholic, hyphenated like that. This is optional. It does not need to be used, but it is available for all those products with an ABV less than 0.5%. If you're selling anything that has even 0.6% ABV, then it's full strength beer, and all those other rules will apply. But if it is below 0.5, then it is non-alcoholic, and you can use that phrase. Again, if you are going to say non-alcoholic, then you need to make it very clear to consumers by also putting on there contains less than 0.5% alcohol by volume. In that exact phrasing on the label must be clear and prominent. The other very important thing you want to make sure is on your non-alcoholic beer labels is that they are, if they're truly under 0.5%, they must prominently state non-taxable under section 505(1) IRC. just like that, just in the quotations, don't change anything. And this is important because there is these 0.5 of these, cereal beverages with an ABV under 0.5% are a special category of products under the IRC that are non-taxable, which is very important to recognize and important to realize beyond your labeling, is that these products are not subject to federal taxes. You may still need to report them to the TTB. You may still need to indicate your production, but these are not subject to federal taxes. And so you don't want to be paying taxes on them. And then you also must, prominently indicate that they are non-taxable. So this is, we're going to look at an example here. This is something I took from a TTB presentation on low/no alcohol beer from a couple of years ago. Really a great presentation. So if you want to hear more about the federal rules, the TTB is always a great resource. They're extremely friendly. They're always very nice. They want to make sure you're doing things right. So if you do have questions, by all means, do talk to the TTB about this. But here is an example of an acceptable label they put out. First it is indicating who makes it, where it was made, that sort of identification using the proper nomenclature for the sizing. It's designating it as a malt beverage and prominently saying non-alcoholic and contains less than 0.5% and non-taxable under section 5051 IRC. So all these things that you want to make sure are on there or are not on there. This is sort of the base example of an acceptable label. You want to make sure you're getting that across. The other thing that can come up when it comes to labeling is FDA labeling. When it comes to beverage alcohol, there's sort of a grand compromise between the TTB and the FDA that says that if any product is subject to the Federal Alcohol Administration Act, so these are beers made with malt and hops that have an ABV over or sold interstate. These are wine products that have an ABV greater than 7%, and all spirits-based products. If they are subject to those rules, then the FDA rules that they do not need to go through specific FDA approval and processing. The TTB will kind of govern them to make sure that no FDA rules are being crossed. However, if these products are not subject to the Federal Alcohol Administration Act, they're a wine product under 7%, or they are not made with both malt and hops, then you are subject to the FDA rules, and you want to make sure that you're properly labeling them in full compliance with the FDA rules. So this really comes down to making sure your labels are properly set out. One of these, again, is setting the statement of identity, indicating who's making them, where it's being made, indicate what the net quantity is, who the manufacturer, these sort of things that are standard with a regular label. The big difference is that you may need to have this nutrition fact, that the big block of text that says, calories and sodium content and the standard, the amount that you would consume at a time, all those sort of things. You want to make sure that is, I'm sorry?
Serving size.
Serving size, thank you. I would just slip my mind.
I got you.
Well, because it's, this product, its serving size is 1. So you want to make sure that it's all in order. Get your list of ingredients, list of major allergens on there, and make sure that's all correct and properly formatted. And this is highly recommended to work with an expert on FDA light labeling. This is a whole other area of law that can get very complicated. There's a lot of rules around it. I've heard that, frankly, with non-alcoholic beer, with low ABV wines, etc., it's not quite as complicated as making a cracker product or something with a lot of allergens or other ingredients in there. But it can get very complicated, and you want to make sure you're doing it right. So again, this is just all about using the experts that are out there, because these rules exist and they can make it difficult. So you want to be aware of if you are subject to these, and so you can get these intact. And these are basically the rules that broadly apply to these products. Making sure that you are applying to the federal rules will get you 90% of the way there when it comes to actually making and selling these products. So again, this is sort of a very, very high level, 100,000 foot level look at these rules around here. But just be aware of these when you're making these products. because they can get in your way, and you don't want that to happen. However, then there are, the other 10% of everything, the other rules that come into producing and selling beers at non-alcoholic beers at the state level. And so we're going to turn to that, and I'm going to really hand things over to Shauna to take over and discuss these more issues.
Thanks, Alex. So thank you so much. Like, I think that what you went through is the 75% of the issues that kind of get you to getting this product to shelf, right? But then the state level can be a whole other animal, as well as kind of thinking through the route to market and all the legal and compliance challenges there. So what I usually recommend my clients do is start by making sure that they have the authorization to manufacture the product. And if this is the first product that you're going to make sure you're getting the right state license. And if you're already manufacturing beer and you're going to do a non-alc extension, make sure that you have the right to make this under your current license. Some states don't actually permit you to make non-alcoholic beer under a brewery license. So I always recommend that you kind of check and confirm that definition and see what privileges your permits give you to make sure you're authorized to produce it. And I should be clear, there are a handful of states that actually don't, I mentioned this, but Maryland, my own state in particular, doesn't allow you to make it under the brewery statute. They're aware of the issue. They're working through it. If you find that it's not covered or it's kind of in a gray zone, I usually recommend folks check the regular beverage regulation. So if you're not totally sure it's falling under the definition of beer and you need a brewery license, check to see if there's a beverage permit required. And when in doubt, I usually recommend that folks call their state regulator, call the agency, call the commissioner, and ask them. You'll find that they usually work really well with you. And then if that goes poorly, that's usually when I recommend folks get with their state guild and try to sort it out, because these products should be permitted to be made in every state, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Have you really had to deal with this? Has it been successful with this so far and getting?
Yeah. So in a handful of states, they're looking at it and they're trying to figure out if it's best to handle it by regulation or by statute. And actually, in a prior life, when I was still general counsel at Dogfish, we had a really similar issue where we realized we were only allowed to make malt-based spirits under our brewery pub license. And everybody in the state had been making rum for years, which is not malt-based. And so we were able to kind of go to our state senator, make a quick tweak to the law, get that taken care of through. It was great. It was a great emergency, quick cleanup. Nobody wanted to keep folks from being able to make these products. I think everybody recognizes they've got, a place in the market. So I do think that you're not doomed if the state doesn't appear to capture this product, and you do need a legislative change.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, people want us to be successful. They want things to get forward. So it's really
exactly
just being clear.
So check your license. Moral of the story, check your license, check your state regs, make sure you've got the right to make this under the right state license. And then the next thing you want to think through is how are you going to get this product to market, right? So a lot of folks get excited. They want to sell it direct to consumer, or maybe sell it through their current built out distribution network. I usually tell folks to take a step back and see if the state you want to sell it into treats it as a beer or a beverage. Because that may impact both how it's taxed and if it's taxed, and then also whether or not you need to register the brand with the states. This is often a separate question from whether or not franchise laws apply. So they may or may not apply, but you're going to want to check both your state regulations and your contracts, and make sure that you're thinking about whether or not this is a non-alc extension of a beer brand or a brand kind of new to world product that you're launching. For example, Illinois doesn't really regulate non-alcoholic beer except under BIFTA, which is their beer franchise statute. So it can kind of be confusing. So you end up really needing to check the regulations in 3 places: the tax code, the definitions code to see if the agency actually covers it, and then separately the beer franchise statute to see who's supposed to be bringing this thing to market. I know I only have a moment left here, so I'm just going to kind of quickly wrap that up. I also just want to note that you definitely want to check the marketing and advertising rules. I get a lot of questions about whether there's more room to play in the trade practices retailer support. Are you able to give, first fills, cross merchandising issues? And ultimately, it's really going to depend. It's going to be state by state specific, but it's something you want to get ahead of. And then similarly, I get asked a lot if this product can be sampled on the street by Red Bull. And that's one where you really want to think about not just how the state's treating it, how's it treated under the state regulations, but then also, are there any local regulations? Because believe it or not, Red Bull probably has permits to do some of the things that it does, even though it looks like really great guerrilla marketing. I don't want us to go over time. Alex, am I missing anything, or is this a good point for us to wrap?
We actually have a fair amount of time. I think we got another at least 15 minutes here.
Oh, we do. Fantastic.
Yeah,
I apologize.
of course, we're open to questions and comments
through.
if people do have anything coming in. But
yes,
I don't want you to rush through things. So maybe we can, even take a step back.
Let's back it back up. I apologize. I thought we were down to top of the hour. Let's just reverse. Okay. So getting back into the distribution, because I was flying through and there's a lot to unpack there.
Very important.
So backing it up to whether or not the franchise laws apply, you're definitely going to want to check your state regulations and your contracts. So a number of my clients will be super excited about, kind of what I think of as the athletic model, which is, a lot of direct to consumer sales, maybe a little bit of beer, using beer wholesalers in the states that require it, or states where, those are the business sales that you want to make. There's a lot that goes to that. And you may already have given your rights away if you're a brand that's in a couple of states and you didn't carve that out of your agreement. So again, it's not, you're not ruined. You can always go back, have a conversation with your wholesaler. You can look at maybe doing some amendments. There's a thing in this space called an invasion fee. So you could potentially pay, a per case sale. It's kind of a sorry about your exclusive territory. We recognize you're doing a lot of really great work over here, but you don't sell here, or and that's a whole other thing is if you're a brand that this is brand new to you, right? So you're not currently making traditional beer. You're just thinking it'd be really cool to make a non-alc beer and bring that to market as my first product. You have a lot more space to play than those folks that are kind of adding it as an extension of a product they already make. So thinking through, do you actually want to go with a beer wholesaler? You could go with a broadliner or a specialty distributor, which are kind of what you think of as like your Cisco or your Aramark, the big trucks you see on the road that are full of food. You could potentially work with some of them. You can make direct sales yourself in some cases. It really, I always tell clients to take that step back and think about, what are you making? Who is your consumer? And where do you want it to go? And then from there, craft your agreements and your strategy in a way that gets you there. So keeping in mind that beer distributors might not service to food channels. I tell the story, I had a client that was really excited about getting placement in a fast casual location, and then realized that their beer distributor that they had just given the rights to couldn't actually get the product there because they don't serve there. And we had to kind of claw back and redo and kind of look at things a bunch of different ways. And that's not necessarily, the best strategy. The other thing that's really interesting is it may be treated by franchise or be required to be sold in a certain way in some markets, but not others. So again, if you're selling in your local territory, it's a little bit easier. But if this is a product that you're really hoping to sell direct to consumer or much wider, you really want to kind of look at all the states that you want to be and then craft a long-term strategy. Because there's nothing worse than getting halfway down the line and getting halfway down the line and then having to claw back, have difficult conversations with retailers about commitments that you can't make, and difficult conversations with distributors about commitments there that maybe need to be clawed back, or you're negotiating invasion fees at a point where they already have you dead to rights. Not your best moment for leverage, for sure.
Yes,
I
can definitely cut problematic. I noticed, we deal a lot with direct-to-consumer shipping, and I think that this comes down to so many states exclude under 0.5 from their alcohol regulations, and so broadly, direct-to-consumer is fairly open, but you always want to be aware of the specific states, right?
Yep. No, absolutely. And just because you could maybe sell it direct to consumer doesn't mean that you don't necessarily need state licensing as well, or that there aren't tax payments or shipping reports or depletion reports. And I think, Alex, you would like, people forget about things like local sales taxes that need to be collected. So it's not as easy as just, I threw it on my website, I could just ship it to everybody who wants it. It's definitely something that at least we recommend. And usually we actually send folks your way, Alex, especially for the compliance components, to make sure they're paying those taxes appropriately.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just something you want to really plan for, at least in my experience. It sounds like yours as well.
Yeah, definitely want to get ahead of all of that. But then I think you were also mentioning about the advertising and marketing options for that.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's more play here for non-alcoholic
Yeah,
manufacturers than people who are in the
yeah,
alcoholic
no, so
industry?
it's fun. Because I think that this is a space where there's potentially innovation and a little bit of white space. Although I always throw up the caveat of, don't be cute. Let's still be responsible before
Absolutely.
that play gets taken away from us because we as an industry made poor decisions. So, um, so what's interesting is, from a trade practices, retailer support angle, it really is going to depend on the state. I mean, this is the theme of the second half of the presentation, right? It's really going to depend on the state,
Mm.
um, the state and the state regs and the state code for each place where you're selling in. But it also is going to depend on who you are, right? Because I get a lot of clients who come to me and say, I made a non-alc. I have a beer, I have spirits, I have these other things I'm making over here, but I made a non-alc. So I can give retailers extra pricing support. I can give them first fills. I can give them, special discounts and things that I know I can't give on the alcohol side, but I could totally do it on the non-alc side, right? And the answer is, of course, in true lawyer fashion, it depends. Um, Regulators are wise to this. I think, Alex, you've been to the same industry
Mhm.
conferences I have in the last, 18 months as these products have gotten more traction. And they're very nervous about the idea, especially if you're already a regulated industry member, that you're going to use this as kind of a way to do indirectly what you can't do directly. So what we recommend, of course, is that you think responsibly about what you're doing and make sure that what you're doing for retailer support on the non-outside, even in the states where it might be okay, are lawful. Now, if you are a beer, and the way that this kind of gets covered is if you're a beer brand making a non-alc, right? If you're a brewery or a regulated manufacturer making a non-alc, um, the statutes are not written to say, typically, and there are some exceptions, but the statutes aren't written to say you get an exception. It only applies to alcoholic beverages. Like when you're making a sale of alcoholic beverages, you can't do this with a retailer. The way they're written is industry members, regulated licensed industry members, which breweries, wineries, distilleries um, are not allowed to do certain things as they interact with retailers. So be aware of that if you're doing it as a brand extension. What's
Mm.
kind of interesting though, and this is where I get excited, is if you're not doing it as a brand extension, and I hate to keep you, they are not a client athletic, they do make a tasty product. Um, their kind of model, right? Where that's the only thing they make, non-alcoholic beer, right? They weren't a brewery that expanded into the space. They were always doing non-alc. There's some really open areas that they can play in that they may be able to do a little bit more than your brewery who added this as a brand extension, right? So, or as a new product that they're coming out with because they already have the licensing and they're looking to differentiate. So a lot of clients will come to me and say, well, I want to do what so and so is doing. And I'm like, well, so and so doesn't have so and so is a brand owner that doesn't have a brewer's notice and isn't licensed as a manufacturer in that state. So they maybe have a little more space to play than you do. Now, that's today. That loophole, or I don't want to call it a loophole, that issue could be closed at some point. And so everybody gets treated
Mm.
the same. But for right now, just kind of be aware of the fact that you might be treated differently if you're already a regulated industry member as compared to somebody who's making, what for all intents and purposes is kind of juice, right? So they maybe get different rules. I always joke though that, they're the ones that end up getting to work with the broadliners and the Cisco's of the world. And it's really hard to do really good distribution without the beer wholesalers if you want to be in the alcohol space. So they've got their own challenges that they're working through too. Everybody's got their own. Everybody's got their own.
Yeah, absolutely. But a good reminder there is you don't want to do anything that would risk your brewer's permit just to sell these products. So yeah, be aware of what you can and cannot do as a licensee versus as a maker of non-alcoholic or seller of non-alcoholic beers. So
Absolutely.
a lot of
Absolutely.
questions there.
So yeah, so my recommendation there, and I know I keep harping on it, but I think it's helpful, is really conduct that thorough state-by-state analysis to make sure you're meeting the requirements for each state for their marketing and advertising so that and their trade practice rules. So you know whether you fall under the category or not, and you can be sure that you're compliant. So now, we're checking the TTB regs and statutes. We're checking the state definition for beer, right? We're checking how is it treated for advertising. We're checking how is it treated for franchise and how is it treated for tax. So that's 5 spots you want to look at before you launch your product. And again, I just recommend the more you can get ahead of that, the better off you're going to be, because there's nothing worse than making a commitment to a retailer that you ultimately can't meet either on the timeline you want to meet it on or at all because your wholesaler is not able to fulfill it or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And you really got to get to that state level, because there are states where you can't sell it in liquor stores. There are states where you can only sell it in liquor stores. So yeah, this is, again, there's no one size solution that really fits for all of us, is there?
Nope. It's what I hate. I feel like it's the lawyer answer. Well, it depends, right? But it's, unfortunately, I feel like that's the alcohol, and in this case, non-alcohol industry in a nutshell. It really is fact specific, and it's going to be product specific. And so it depends.
Yeah, exactly. And, this is, where it really helps to get that expert consultation and help out there. But I think that, every lawyer should just get "it depends" tattooed on their shoulder first day.
It's like right here.
Yeah, that's the answer to everything.
On my wrist. It depends.
And I think to that, you were mentioning it earlier, the responsibility around this,
right,
and labeling and advertising as, even if this is non-alcoholic, that is no excuse to bring kids into this.
I liken it to candy cigarettes,
exactly.
Right? I mean, ultimately, I think this is a space where there isn't maybe as much regulation as folks would expect, and I'll just leave it at that. But I do think that it's an opportunity, and what I recommend for my clients is to be responsible, right? So make sure you're marketing to folks who are of legal drinking age. I think that's best practices. We don't want to, as an industry, we don't want in a situation, like the RJRs of the world were, where, they were, candy cigarettes is the trade up to cigarettes. We don't want non-alcoholic beer to be considered the trade up to alcohol. And so I think, following all the general advertising rules that would apply to a beer, to your NA, and you can't go wrong. You can go wrong, but you'll be in a much better risk position, in my humble opinion.
The path at least to follow there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Like we said, there's just so much information out there. We hope we can provide a little bit of guidance on what's going on. I think we got a little bit of time if anybody does have questions. Other than that, I guess, I don't know, Shauna, if you have any last comments, here, if you do have any want to hear from us more, get in contact with us, see what kind of services we can provide. You can hear more about what I do and what we provide at ShipCompliant at sovos.com/ShipCompliant. And of course, go to drinkslaw.com to hear more about Shauna and contact her. Any last thoughts?
No, I was just going to say, I always, I appreciate so much when folks listen to the information that we put out. So if you're listening to this today and you have a question that you wish you'd ask, but you're maybe listening later, please, there's a box through the Drinkslaw website. Shoot me a note, tell me you saw this, ask me a question, I'll answer it. I know that sometimes, legal advice is expensive, and you gave me some of your time to watch, so I'll happily give you some of mine to answer that initial question for you without making you do an engagement and all the things. So, yeah.
Very, very generous of you. And
happy to help. It's a collaborative industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. We got a lot of information on our website too. You want to hear about interstate distribution and shipping laws. We're all have that information. We're publishing on our blog. So yeah, we're always sharing the knowledge. Isn't that what it's about?
Absolutely.
So I guess to that, thank you all so much for paying attention to us, to listening to us today. Thank you again so much to the Craft Beer Professionals Guild organization. This is really fantastic to be involved on. This is my 6th, 7th time speaking at these organizations. So it's really a delight. I really appreciate it. And I hope you get a lot of other great information from the other great panels they have this week. So thank you once again.
Great. Thank you so much.
Great.